Welcome to the Level Up podcast presented by The Ultimate Gamer, a show that features conversations with the trailblazers, thought leaders, risk takers, decision makers, celebrities, athletes, and investors who are defining the gaming and eSports space. On Level Up, we take a journey into this dynamic industry and start to decode and reveal who and what's making news. It's about connecting, and it's about sharing the stories and vision of the people who make gaming and esports a global phenomenon. As we do in every episode, we'd like to thank The Ultimate Gamer as the visionary and catalyst behind Level Up. The Ultimate Gamer is an esports and gaming, entertainment, technology, culture, and lifestyle organization with the intention of discovering the best gamer in the world. Connecting and celebrating gamers and gaming is at the core of The Ultimate Gamer's mission. And now, please welcome your host, student of the game and connector to the esports community, Tommy Knapp.
What's up, everyone? I'm Tommy Knapp, and this is an all-new episode of the Level Up podcast presented by The Ultimate Gamer. On today's show, I have a conversation with Renee Gittins, Executive Director of the IGDA, which is the International Game Developers Association, and a multidisciplinary leader with expertise in software engineering and creative direction. In addition to her role as Executive Director, she maintains her work as the CEO of Stumbling Cat, creator of Potions, A Curious Tale. As her cat scuffled briefly off camera, but within earshot, Renee and I discussed her love of smoky flavored scotch, IGDA resources such as Global Mentorship, her introduction to the FPS genre at a very young age, and her visit to Capitol Hill to represent the gaming industry in front of the FTC. Renee is outspoken about initiatives to increase diversity both within the gaming industry and gaming overall, especially within virtual reality. In addition to IGDA initiatives to further support the growth of developers, she's organized game jams, panels, job fairs, and other developer events, and also mentored game development students and built education programs at Foundry 10. Our conversation today offers just a glimpse of the woman behind this Forbes 30 Under 30 honoree. Join me now with Renee Gittins.
Very excited to talk to you. It's kind of crazy because as I reach into like a lot of the backstory of people's experience and their lives, there's so much there, right? And it's a 30. I don't know your age now. You don't have to tell me your age, but you know there's that 30 under 30. I think you won or became an award winner for that. How does that? By the way, what is a 30 under 30?
So the 30 under 30 is a list by Forbes of the 30 most influential people within their industry who are under 30 years old.
So how do they find you? Because that's pretty impressive, right?
There is a nomination thing, and so I know a few people nominated me. So
that's very exciting. It's nice to know when you have friends like that and colleagues that will nominate you for something.
Definitely.
Yeah. So before we kind of jump into, which I'm very impressed with and very excited to talk to you about the IGDA and some of the other things that you're doing there, I kind of wanted to get into some of the things that are a little less corporate or work related because I'm a beer lover. I don't know if you drink any barley wines, but I love Blithering Idiot from Weyerbacher in Pennsylvania. And in your Twitter, you mentioned that you are a food, scotch, and beer lover. So when you say that, like scotch, how did you become a scotch lover, and what are your favorite beers?
So I became a scotch lover. That's more recent, probably in the last 4 years.
Okay.
I've always really liked strong flavors, and I love smoky flavors. So actually, I'm really big on Islay scotches.
Okay.
Lagavulin 16 is probably my favorite.
Okay. And so when do you drink that? Do you is that one you throw over a big rock or a big ice cube,
I tend to drink it neat.
Okay.
So maybe I'll do a little tiny drop of water, but yeah, I generally drink my scotches neat.
Okay.
And yeah, I have some really sizable tumblers, so you don't get too much of that head. Come on, guys. Don't make me separate you two. I don't know if you can hear that. Can you hear that?
I heard a little something, and I'm assuming because that's another thing I was going to ask you about with the crazy cats. Are those cats?
Those are two cats fighting, yeah.
What are your cats' names? I really could barely hear them. I think it was maybe they threw a couple left jabs or maybe a right hook. That was all I think maybe that I heard.
Well, I can ignore them during the podcast until one jumps up in my face, but for the most part, we'll be fine.
Okay. Yeah. So you said that about Scotch, but how did you actually become, what interested you in Scotch? When did you have your first one?
I had started drinking whiskey actually through meeting people at the in the game industry.
Okay.
And there's at least one person who runs a Scotch night at GDC. So that gave me the opportunity to try. I think at the first one I went to, there was over, if you counted all the years of the Scotch that were there, like each one that was 18 years, you added up, right. There was like 253 years of Scotch. So it gave me a good opportunity to try a large variety of it. So I have some favorites. On one side, I really like Lagavulin 16, but on the like beginner Scotch side, like a beginner whiskey side, I really like Nika Coffee Grain.
Okay. Yeah, I know very little about Scotch, but I do know I drink, quite a bit of wine, red wine, and there are beers that I like, and for beers especially, I can distinguish the difference between like a lager and a stout and a porter, that kind of thing. Have you been able to distinguish that? If I gave you the blind taste test right now, would you be able to say, oh, this is any one of those Scotches that you just mentioned?
Oh yeah, they're really, really different in flavor, even more so than beer.
Really?
Yeah. And when it comes to beer, I like everything except for I find sours can be really hit and miss.
Right.
Some sours just don't really do it for me, but Belgians and lagers and red ales and porters, IPAs, I'm from Seattle, so.
You're from Seattle, but where do you live now?
I'm currently in Baltimore.
Baltimore. Okay. How's the scene there as far as microbreweries go?
I haven't been able to explore as much of them as I would have liked. It's somewhat healthy though.
Okay.
I had a really interesting peanut butter Hefeweizen from nice. Pennsylvania though, and that was really good, but it's really hard to find. Yeah,
what's interesting is I find, like you said, you came from Seattle and you go to Baltimore. Some of my favorite beers through my travels, I was just in North Carolina recently in Asheville, and I think it was Star Brewery, and there were a few others. But you can't access those. You can't get those unless you order them online and get them shipped to you. You can't get them in your local region typically.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that's kind of fun when you travel around. So that's fascinating. I could talk to you about that for probably a couple of hours, but I would prefer to do that over a Scotch or a beer than do it this way.
Who knows when that can be?
Exactly. Who knows when we're going to be there? But on the animal side, on the animal kingdom and the cat side, you're a cat lover. You've got two right there. How many do you have? And what are those two?
I have two cats and a dog.
Okay. And their names?
We have Calcifer, Fiddle, and Chica.
It's always interesting to me when people talk about the names of their animals because, again, you have to come up with those. So where did you come up with the three names?
Calcifer is the fire demon from Howl's Moving Castle because he's a little demon.
Okay.
Fiddle, I let one of my friends name, and he was actually named after Fiddlesticks from League of Legends, who is that person's favorite character, but I shortened it because I didn't want him to be named Fiddlesticks. So now he's, hey, diddle diddle, the cat named the fiddle.
Okay.
And then Chica is, she's a black lab that's really fast. So we named her after the Chica tribe in Zelda.
Oh, okay. Yes. Yeah, so, I mean, most of it's around the gaming world.
They're all nerdy names.
No, I love it. So that's what we're going to jump right into that in a second. But I had a chocolate lab for 13 years. Does your lab swim? Does she catch like frisbees and balls?
So she's half black lab, and she's actually what I consider like a fun-sized black lab. So she's really tall and skinny. She looks kind of like a greyhound almost.
Okay.
Like a whippet. She's only 30 pounds, all legs, and she loves playing chase. Like fetch, running around. Fetch is her favorite thing. She's clearly a retriever.
Right.
She will go into the water to get balls. She won't go in the water for any other reason, but that's because she just wants to be either by you or on you or chasing something.
Right. I love it. Well, so let's jump into the gaming. So when did you start gaming? Because it sounds like you've pretty much from your childhood probably started gaming and became a gamer and then got into game development and got into the technical side. And I'll admit to you right now, I'm pretty intimidated by the technical side of things. I can't speak the language. And one of the questions I was going to ask you, and I want you to talk about that first, how you got into it, but it's just like at an IGDA conference or any other gaming conference, like if I walked into the room, would I just be totally out of my element? Does everybody speak in computer language the whole time? Or is
No, I mean, there's a whole range of, game development careers and therefore skill sets. So you do have people who are more technical and some who are less. Truthfully, a lot of the game development language that you'll run into is more around processes like pipelines and things like that.
Okay.
You get the technical stuff occasionally, but that's more towards like engineer to engineer conversation or engineer to management conversation.
Okay. And were you born with a remote control in your hand, or when did you start really getting into gaming?
My dad introduced me to first-person shooters when I was around 4 or 5.
Okay. All right.
So I actually started out as a PC gamer.
All right. And then
playing on the DOS.
And so, yeah. So talk about that a little bit. Playing. What was that like? Because this is probably what, 95?
Yeah, that was it.
Okay.
My introduction to video games was very different than most people my age. Most people had a Nintendo console or even a PlayStation initially. My first 4 games in order were Wolfenstein 3D, Doom, Duke Nukem 3D, Pokemon Yellow.
Okay.
So I was hearing lots of swear words before I even played my first game targeted at kids.
And when you say swear words, is that because of the local scene, like a LAN center? Because at that point, right, it's not internet, and you don't have headphones on talking to people all over the world.
No, Duke Nukem 3D is just very explicit.
Okay. Oh, the game itself. The game itself.
Oh, yeah. It's
not the people
I
playing.
will rip off your head and shit down your neck.
Okay. Yeah, that is an interesting introduction to gaming. It's a little bit different than Minecraft.
Yeah, it's a little bit different than Minecraft, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But I love it. I mean, I really fell in love with games, not only as like a bonding experience, because truthfully, when I first started getting first-person shooters, I'd mostly sit next to my father and watch him play.
Okay.
But I think it was actually Half-Life, the original Half-Life, that made me absolutely fall in love with games, because that was the first time where it was a truly immersive experience. Like it wasn't just you were running around and shooting things and being scared, but you felt like you had a part in the story, that you were really there. And all of the little details that told a story to you as you experienced it, instead of people just talking at you about it. It just blew me away.
Yeah, that feels to me, and I know that's happening now with my own kids, and it feels to me like when I was growing up that would happen with when I read books a lot of times, right? That when you read a book, you kind of it's taking place in your mind, and you're just reading the words on the page, but you also then you're getting involved in it, and gaming kind of takes you to a whole different level.
Yeah, exactly. Because you get to be part of the world, and
Yeah.
I was a huge avid fantasy reader as a kid growing up too. I would be the kid sitting in the back of class so I could read a fantasy novel under the table.
Right. That's interesting. So how does that, because a lot of people that are talented in games aren't specifically talented in game design, game development, want to know how they work and function on the backside. That sounds like you have that in you, like you like that technical side of things, and you actually like to build out and design games.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, on the technical aspect, growing up, math was my favorite subject.
Okay.
So logical approaches to things is really fun for me.
Right.
When it comes to game design, I see both the sort of logic side and the emotional side. I think that a fun game, like a truly fun game, invokes emotions. And how you polish a game is by polishing those points that provide emotional reactions, whether they're positive emotions, like getting a good headshot and feeling like really excited about it, or just winning, or more negative emotions like being scared or anxious, or failing but not feeling like you've truly failed, but getting that like I know what I need to do. I want to do it again. Like, if you tune a game to really amplify those, that's what's going to make people love it. So that's what I'm doing with my own game. I'm making sure that I have a lot of those little emotion points where either you're looking at a character in this the story and you're feeling strong emotions. You're like, screw that person, or yes, let's help this person, or yeah, like you tell them. Or you suddenly are faced with something unexpected that if you had expected it, it wouldn't be scary, but that surprise makes the experience completely different.
Yeah, when you're saying that, it kind of makes me think of like a comedian. When a comedian's trying to create the material and they're creating the joke and they think it's funny, right? And they know that they have some type of reaction to it, but they're not sure until they get it out there in front of an audience. And
that's why playtesting and iteration is so important.
Yeah. That's very cool. So did you walk into like your first role? What would you say your first role was in? Is it Hashbang? Was it as a technical manager with Hashbang Games, or were you doing something before that even?
I mean, my very first role in games itself was when I was in Biotech, actually. I was asked to make games to help judge the cognitive levels of children to help detect whether or not they have suffered from concussion. So I made mini games like matching games, tap the butterflies, things like that.
Yeah, I had 3 concussions. That's interesting. So somebody has a concussion. I've got them playing college football or football. When somebody has a concussion, so you're saying on the way back, because I never had any of this testing. So
you first need a baseline test, right. And then once you are hit, you can do tests to determine if you're facing any like cognitive issues at the time, and that's a good way to track people as they recover. So there's a standard test called unfortunately called the SCAT test. That's the abbreviation for testing for concussions, but it requires a lot of questions that don't work on a younger audience or will give you inconsistent results. So for example, one of the standard questions on that test is, say the months of the year in backwards order starting at December. Okay. Now, if you're in Pee Wee football, you probably don't really remember the months in order, or perhaps you just went through a unit of it. So when you did your baseline test, you didn't know, but now, 6 months later, you were taught it in school. And so instead, we did like game-based tests, which gave perhaps even more precise results.
And are those still tests? I mean, those are tests that are used today.
I am not sure. I haven't been with that company for quite a while.
Okay. I mean, it sounds to me like something that's very necessary. But again, kind of to your point, you almost have to have every child when they're coming into school take that test, because if you don't, then somebody who's playing sports, if they haven't taken the test, then you don't have any reliable measurements to kind of, take the new test from.
Amusingly enough, I found this out because I had been like testing a bunch of the tests, but never officially took one myself, and then received a concussion while I was working there. I was like, well, great. Now I can't even use the test because I never took a baseline.
How did you get the concussion?
I had a car trunk shot on my head.
A what? A car trunk?
Shut on my head.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So I got 5 staples. It's
no. Scalp. Like was it a friend slamming it down, or was it one of those electric, you just hit your button and you didn't realize it and it came down on you?
It was a steep hill. I threw the trunk open, leaned in, and it was literally like a almost 45-degree angle hill. Wow. And there wasn't enough gravity. It just bounced at the top. I leaned in and it shut.
Oh man, did you fall down on the ground?
I did, yeah.
You did? Was anybody with you?
Yeah, my boyfriend at the time was driving the car. And there's definitely 2 types of reactions. There's the shock reaction, like the shock sit down, be in shock reaction. And then there's like the active shock reaction. I reacted the active way.
Okay.
So I popped up, came up to him, I'm like, okay, I got my stuff. He's like, I thought you just shut the trunk twice. I'm like, no, it just shut on my head. He goes, that was really loud. And he's like, are you bleeding? And I touched my head and looked and went, oh, I am bleeding. He's like, okay, let's go to the hospital. I'm like, no, let's see if I need stitches. I'll be right back. And I just ran off.
You ran off?
I was at my workplace. So I ran off to my work and was like, hey, I need to know, do I need stitches?
Yeah.
And eventually, like, our engineering manager dragged me into the kitchen and washed my head off. And was like, yeah, you do.
Wow. Yeah, you don't always make the best decisions when you have a concussion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it worked out.
Yeah, you're fine now. So that's, I mean, to me, that's very necessary work and what you talked about doing. That was kind of your entry into I guess, engineering games, but for a different purpose. So what was the next role?
My next role after that was, I actually, while I was working that job, I started as a producer for a game team. And then one of the server engineers left. So I ended up doing both the back end development and production.
So you kind of just got thrown into the deep end of the pool and said, figure all this out.
Yeah, that's generally what my career has been. Lots of diving into deep ends.
Well, let's talk a little bit about IGDA then, because obviously you've taken over the role as executive director there. I think it's been over just about a year now.
10 months.
Okay. And tell us about the International Game Developers Association and what you guys do there, because I think it's been around, and if you can, run through the history of IGDA and what specifically you guys do, because to me, I didn't know that much about it. I do know a few publishers down here locally in South Florida, and I want to ask them if they're part of the IGDA, because one of the things I looked at was your membership, and I saw that you have a chapter in Orlando, and I think you have one maybe, I don't know if it was Jacksonville or if it was on the other side of the state, but I didn't see anything in South Florida. So I might have to tell Rick that he's got to start a chapter down here in South Florida.
Yeah, I mean, anyone's welcome to contact us about starting a chapter. So the IGDA really does three things. We provide knowledge, we provide community, and we provide advocacy. So for the knowledge, we do white papers, webinars, surveys, conferences. We really help not only track the state of the industry and the health of it, but we provide materials for people advancing their career or advancing their business. On the community side, we have all of those wonderful local chapters, and we also have our special interest groups. So in total, we have over 150 local chapters and special interest groups around the world, everywhere from IGDA Japan to IGDA Finland to IGDA Seattle.
Okay.
Those are communities that meet in person when there's not a pandemic and provide support to each other. The special interest groups, on the other hand, are more affinity-based. So you have ones that are based around disciplines such as quality assurance, game designers, game writers, and you have ones that are based around different groups of people, Blacks in games, LGBTQ+, women in games. And then on the advocacy side, the reason that the game developer or the International Game Developers Organization was formed was to support the voice of game developers and to give them a voice that can be heard as individuals, not as studios, not as companies, as individual game developers.
Okay.
So we do a lot of advocacy, reaching out to studios, trying to tell them best practices, talking to governments about games don't cause an increase in gun violence. And we, speak up and make a presence for game developers so they can have their voices heard when it comes to these important discussions and topics.
So just landing on that one, we could talk about, we don't have to talk about gun violence, but it's just one of the ones you brought up and you're an advocate for that. How difficult is that and how does it change from country to country? I mean, is there a consistent message across the world? Because I know like in some countries, in European countries, I don't think it's as much an issue and there isn't a focus on blaming the gaming industry for gun violence, right? And yet here we have much more of that. So when you go out there and you're an advocate, does that message change from country to country? And I'm assuming it's somewhat customized depending on who you're talking to.
Yeah, definitely. We sort of address the issues as they come up. It's hard to predict what every single country all around the world is going to be talking about. For example, when loot boxes came up as a topic, clearly the different countries were approaching that differently, but we made sure that our message was fairly universal in our recommendations for how the game industry should approach those.
Yeah, I love that topic. So before you go on, can you just explain a little bit more? Because some people that are going to be listening won't know what a loot box is. So can you explain what a loot box is, why it might be considered dangerous, why you need an advocacy group for that?
Yeah, so loot boxes are generally considered to be in-game purchased items, either with real currency or in-game currency, that provide you a reward at random. The definition of loot box needs to be very carefully considered because there are a lot of random reward mechanics within games. So if you look at World of Warcraft, if you slay a dragon, you might get a helm or a sword or nothing. So that's a randomized mechanic, but that's not generally considered to be a loot box. However, with improper definitions of what loot boxes are, that could be considered and would greatly affect all games when loot box laws are being put out. So the concern around loot boxes is lack of transparency when it comes to the chances of random rewards and the possible relation to gambling behaviors as you are putting in currency for an unknown reward or a reward that might vary in value. And that's where there's a lot of concerns, especially some games had previously allowed you to use real money to buy fake currency, to buy loot boxes, to get items to sell for real money, which is, when you look at it overall, that's just currency, like that's actual real money gambling, which is illegal if it's not being monitored under gambling laws.
And do you find yourself personally or anyone from IGDA, are you in front of government entities or do you have to support or represent anybody like at the Supreme Court level?
So actually the IGDA was invited to present on an FTC panel back in August about loot boxes. So I went to Washington, D.C. and was at the FTC in front of their panel of experts. There was multiple panels, and the IGDA shared our thoughts and recommendations on loot boxes, as well as some direct quotes from IGDA members. So
this feels like something very important that you guys do.
Yeah, definitely. We truly want to support and empower game developers in having fulfilling and sustainable careers. And a large part of that is making sure that what their thoughts, what's best for them, is well known and well represented.
Okay, and when you have members come in, so you said you really go right straight down to the granularly down to the individual. You work with the individual, but I'm assuming most of the time when a member joins, it's a company or an org that's joining, or is it really just an individual?
So we have both. We have affiliated studios, and studio affiliates get all of their employees and contractors IGA membership with their studio affiliation, and they also get some marketing benefits, some special discounts, discounts on Visa letters and software and hardware, and promotional opportunities to our network of over 30,000 game developers. Individually, we have probably half of our membership comes to us as pure individuals, and half of our membership comes to us through affiliated studios.
Okay, and the big studios, are the big studios involved, like a Riot or an Epic, or
Epic Games
are you not allowed to say?
One of our partners.
Okay.
Valve is one of our partners. We have some quite sizable studios with us.
Wow, that's fantastic. And as a member, what does that entail? So is there an annual fee, and then are you invited to? And I see that you do a lot of conferences, and one of the things I said earlier was, would I be able to walk into one of these conferences and actually have a conversation with somebody, or is everybody going to be just talking over my head and in a completely different language because they're game designers and publishers and technical people? So I think the question wasn't, I apologize, the question was really membership. Tell me a little bit about membership, because, and this is me saying, I could, as an individual, be very interested, even though I'm not a game designer. Just being involved in the space with these smart people is something I think that would help anyone.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Right.
It's so, one of the reasons that I work for the IGDA is because the IGDA was so beneficial to my career as I was starting out. And IGDA membership is only $60 a year, which is, really low considering that it comes with thousands of dollars in savings, as well as access to super valuable resources, not only white papers and such, but we've recently launched our own global mentorship program. So if you are even at a mid or senior level, we'll work to find you a mentor who can help you advance your career. And having a strong mentor pairing for only $60 a year, you're going to get more than you're worth.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And we connected, I think, through LinkedIn. Are you still there? Uh-oh, lost you. Where are we here? I lost you, Renee. Send a message. Uh-oh.
Welcome back.
Yeah, sorry about that.
That's okay.
Hold on one second. I'll make sure I got you on the screen. There we go. Yeah, that was something with the internet connection. So it's the first time that's happened to me.
That's fine.
Yeah. So we were talking about, I think you were just mentioning about the resources.
Yeah. So
right?
for individual members.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you could just reiterate a little bit about some of the resources, because as I look again, and your website is fantastic as well, but if you look at some of the resources that you guys have, I mean, they run the gamut. So as an individual, like you said, the mentorship, and so that's where we kind of left off. The mentorship side of things, that side is, and then your network. Is that one of the biggest areas of value for you guys? Because like I said, I reached out to you through LinkedIn, and I find LinkedIn, if you use it the way, anybody can use it any way they want, but I have found it extremely valuable in the way I use it. So again, with your membership, do you find, aside from mentorship, is there also a network there that you can rely on, and do you build a lot of great relationships through that resource?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the community and network is probably the highest value. I know that the only reason my career has grown so significantly is because of the network that I've formed by going to lots and lots of IGDA events, going to conferences, and really just having a presence. I think that it's hard to understate the value of self-promotion and self-promotion through networking, forming those connections, making those partnerships and friendships that will be with you for your entire career.
Yeah, I think having the strong network is so critical, right? One of the other areas that I saw as well, and I typically like to stay very positive in my discussions and my conversations, but there are also certain things that we need to have discussions about so we can learn about them. And you guys are on the front end of harassment. So when we talk about harassment in the gaming industry, what do you guys do there? How do you educate people, and what resources are there for, whether it's a game designer, developer, or just an individual?
Yeah, definitely. So we have our entire own harassment resources page with recommendations for if you're suffering from harassment, whether it's in person or online, the next steps to take and the other resources available to you. We make it very clear that we have a zero tolerance policy when it comes to harassment, and we take harassment really seriously. So if we do an investigation and someone has been found to be harassing people at one of our events, then we completely ban them from the IGDA and all of our events.
Okay.
These resources are also really beneficial for just helping people navigate what to do in these times where, they're feeling attacked, they're feeling vulnerable. And I think that providing those resources and those guidelines is just super helpful to provide people a light to follow when they're dealing with something so dark.
Sure. And some of that is resources, literature, guidelines, things like that, but you also have individuals that people could talk to?
Yeah, of course. the IGA communities are really valuable for that. The Women in Games community, of course, supports women very well who are facing issues. And we also have a mental health special interests group. And of course, the IGA itself is always open. Like, my inbox is always open. If you send an email to info@igda.org, if there's anything that we can do to help you, it will definitely be done.
Okay. And switching gears a little bit, and this is one of those areas that the industry that you're in the gaming industry, there's so much intellectual property. And
Yes.
so on the IP side of things, what do you guys, what kind of resources do you provide your membership? And then, and I mean from the beginning to the end. So if I don't know anything, and I watch Silicon Valley, do you watch Silicon Valley?
I can't watch too much of it. It makes me too stressed.
It does? Yeah. It's kind of crazy. But I see, like, sometimes when you watch something like that, you're like, wow. You're talking about individuals, and it's whether it's the music industry or TV and entertainment, like people that go into an industry and maybe have a tremendous skill, but they don't know how to represent themselves. Right? You see that happen with sometimes again, in the entertainment industry, where somebody has a great voice or they're a great musician and they sign a contract, and then that contract really isn't in their best interest. I can see in the gaming industry, right? The gaming industry, this IP, this intellectual property is so super valuable. And somebody could probably share something that they don't realize if they're sharing it, they're giving it away. So how does somebody that's got that kind of talent and that gift protect themselves? And what measures should they take if they're new, if they're nascent to the industry, they're brand new, they're 17, 18, 19, 20-year-old kid walking into this space with all this knowledge. How do you help them and guide them through their career?
Yeah, well, obviously the best recommendation is, if you have the funds, hire a lawyer, because that's really the expert there. However, the IGDA has our business and legal special interest group that has recommendations when it comes to evaluating contracts and IP, and will also help direct you to resources if you come to them with questions. Similarly, we run many webinars, often from legal professionals who are talking about IP laws, or we have one that just happened about the PPP, the PPP loans that are going out from the government. Okay. So we make sure that we're providing a lot of valuable information and resources for people to navigate those trickier legal sides of things.
And is that in-house, internal, are those experts, or do you have partnerships with attorneys that are specifically in the space?
They're mostly partnerships, actually. We have many partnerships with different attorneys and different companies and groups.
And compared to, say, maybe 15, 20, 25 years ago, do you find that that's an area? Because I believe, whether it's on the agency side or the IP side, the number of things, I believe the legal area in gaming and eSports is an area that's very ripe and massive for opportunity and for people to walk into, because I don't feel like there's a lot of experts in that space, and I think there's a lot of need.
It's hard for me to comment on that front. I am familiar with many lawyers who have specifically focused in practices of either IP law or game development in general. Okay. So I feel like I don't have a full view of the needs versus demands there, just because I am so familiar with the people who supply those demands.
That's understandable. And I think maybe some of it to me is knowing that the people walking into space, and I'll, from personal experience, if you're a traditional sports athlete, basketball, baseball, football, you're walking along those lines of going into a career. So at a young age, and people are telling you that you have a gift, you have a talent, you have a skill, and you know that you need to be represented. LeBron James doesn't go to whatever team he goes to without some type of legal representation. He's not going in and negotiating his contract, right? And he's a very smart guy. However, I know some people in the gaming industry and in the content creation side that believe that they can walk into a negotiation and negotiate their own contract simply because they think that they can handle it. They have no experience. And so to me, like, I think I understand what you're saying now. There probably are a number of people that have an expertise in the space. Maybe it's more that the young people coming out don't realize that they need that expertise.
Yeah, I think that especially people who are starting out might not know what they don't know. That's a very common issue no matter what kind of discipline you're looking at. And I think that really being part of a community helps give you that knowledge. Even knowledge that you don't know that you're missing sort of gets conveyed over seeing other people talk about it, other people asking for advice. The IGDA actually has a really wonderful Discord where there's a lot of conversations going on, and you can sort of see what other people are tackling and the advice that professionals are giving them.
That's fantastic. So tell me some of the things that because you see, you're in this every day, and you're playing the game at a very high level, a technical level, and you're working with all these game designers, developers, publishers. What's really, really exciting to you? What are some of the things that you can't wait to see that are coming out now in the next year, the next 2 years, 3 years, 5 years? Whether it's AI, AR, VR, mixed reality, like where do you really see the excitement and enthusiasm in the industry?
Gosh, that's a hard one. I feel like I'm always excited about everything.
Right.
I'm excited about the next generation of consoles. I'm excited about Unreal Engine 5 that was just announced because it looks gorgeous. I am excited about virtual reality because with this, latest push the last 5 years with virtual reality, I've always been right on that edge and looking forward to seeing what's coming in the future. I mean, the days I can eventually hook into an MMO and really go slay dragons seem astounding to me. And then, I think that as AR improves, there's a lot of great game and non-game uses for it as well. And I've worked at an AI company that was making AI for games, both to help moderate chats, to prevent harassment, which was, big for me when I was growing up, and to help create more dynamic, interactive dialogue experiences.
Well, you said slaying a dragon. I love that, right? Because that's something that anybody could say, oh my, that would be really cool to feel like you're actually fighting and slaying a dragon.
Yeah.
Do you think we're actually close? Because that's the one thing, right, with VR and some of the mixed reality stuff that's happening is everybody, it's too far off. Like, it's not too far off, but it's taking its time to get there. How close are we? Do you feel like we're really getting close now where this is something that you won't have to put on a huge helmet? And because I did this. So I did this in a boxing, I put on, and I tried to box somebody with the VR goggles on. And,
right.
And I was getting caught up in the cord, and because they were moving and I was moving, sometimes I was moving, I was getting myself tangled up in the cord. It was like circling around me. So I guess my question, again, back to that, is do you think we're pretty close to that now?
I think with every year we get closer. I mean, with the Vive, you now have the ability to make it wireless. And so you're not going to get caught up in the cords. I think that we'll probably have the large, bulky headsets for quite a while just due to optics technology. But they are improving every year, and it's becoming more accessible every year. If you look at the Oculus Quest, it doesn't have the absolute best visuals. It doesn't have the strongest hardware. It's only $400 to have a complete headset. You don't need a computer. You can play whatever you want on it. And that makes it more accessible to consumers, which makes more consumers excited about it, which hopefully sells more units. And then, we get to see wonderful games like Half-Life Alyx coming out, and the advancement of not only the technology, but the game design as well.
Right. And when you talk about Unreal Engine and Unreal 5, what are the advances there that we're jumping from Unreal to Unreal 5?
So the demo that Epic recently published had basically direct imported assets from movies, like movie quality assets that were being run in real time. That is not only huge for gamers who get to see these super high fidelity assets, but it actually changes the game development pipeline significantly, because usually if you have a high fidelity asset, you have to take it and then you have to do LOD, which is level of detail, and you have to take the main one and make one that's lower poly and one that's lower poly and one that's lower poly, so that when it's far off in the distance, you're not looking at 10,000 verts. You're looking at something that's more simplistic, and as it gets closer to you, it bumps up that level of detail. So it's taking up more processing power as things in the background are taking up less processing power. With the ability to take that out of the pipeline, that means the whole game development process will be a lot faster, and there can be more focus on creating those high fidelity assets and not worrying about the LOD.
And okay, I mean, I got about 1/4 of what you just said.
Sorry.
But I think it's
when it
necessary.
comes to the technical talk, I guess there is some, but we're looking at like technical graphics rendering and creation. So that does start to get a bit.
That's where I need my partner on the technical side. But
basically, more triangles. It lets you have more triangles, and you don't have to reduce it so there's less triangles, which is generally common.
Okay. And do you feel like the 5G network that's coming, do you think that that's going to affect the industry?
In the same way that internet upgrades do, definitely. We've already seen mobile gaming really take off, and I think 5G is just going to further expand the types of mobile games that we're seeing. And of course, it can expand the size of games that we're seeing too, because people can download larger packets faster for those games. Right. I think that anytime you see an increase in bandwidth and speed, you see the technologies that are making use of that bandwidth and speed increase in the amount of data and information that they're providing, which allows you to have, perhaps larger asset downloads, but also a better connection, allowing for more information to be communicated when it comes to player-to-player interactions.
Okay. And you mentioned earlier, we were talking about when you first got into the industry, talking about gaming and concussions. When you look at gaming now and education, and especially, I mean, my kids have been online. They haven't really had much as far as teaching instruction goes for the past month or two. Where do you see gamification of the education space? And are there any good examples of maybe an area that is doing well?
Yeah, so I worked with an organization called Foundry 10, which does investigations into improvements to education. And they did a lot of studies around integrating games and integrating virtual reality into the classroom. And what they found is when you use games to help create empathy around a situation, it helps with retention of the information around that situation. So it's one thing to read about a situation in a book, and it's another thing to be part of that situation or experience part of it. It helps it store in your memory, makes kids pay more attention, and overall it just improves the effects of learning.
Okay. So yes, we're seeing
yes.
it. Yes, we're seeing it. Well, I mean, I just find that my kids are so passionate about gaming, and if you can create that gaming experience, and I've used this example a couple of times. But one of my sons plays Minecraft, and I don't have to tell him to go into Minecraft and actually engineer and build a building or a house. He wants to do it. And I think that's one of the things that to me, if you find a desire to want to do something, a passion for you, you'll be good at it. So you liked math when you were growing up, but what was it about math itself that absorbed you and made you want to learn more?
Yeah, right? I mean, I just liked critical thinking, like math puzzles. I remember doing like geometry puzzles where you got a paper and it had a bunch of lines all over it, and it had a few angles and then a bunch of relations in between the different lines, and you had to like write out what all of the angles were. And I found that really fun. So I just like logic problem solving. But I think that games are so important when it comes to education for two reasons. One, not only does it create empathy, but it does make the lessons you're learning in the classroom feel like they have real world application. And I know that a common complaint you hear among students is like, oh, great, well, when am I ever going to use calculus in real life? Or when am I going to use this in the real world?
I